I never thought my own sister would stab me in the heart at my graduation dinner. My name is Alexandra Wilson. I'm 27 years old, and what should have been the proudest night of my life became the moment my family finally showed their true colors. It was supposed to be a celebration in my parents' home in Boston, Massachusetts. The night I finally held my MBA degree from New York University. The night I thought my family would finally look at me with pride. I'd even brought a special cake layered with cream and decorated with red roses, a small tribute to mark the milestone I had worked so hard for. The dining room buzzed with chatter. Neighbors, relatives, friends. The clinking of wine glasses and the hum of conversation filled the air. I was setting the cake at the center of the table, smiling through my exhaustion, when everything collapsed. My sister Natalie, 5 years younger, leaned back in her chair, her voice slicing through the laughter like a knife. "You're a burden. We want to live without you." The words landed like a physical blow. My father, sitting at the head of the table, simply smiled and sipped his wine. My mother froze with her fork suspended in the air. Every guest went silent, eyes darting nervously. No one said a word. Not Dad. Not Mom. Not a single friend. The room suffocated me with its silence. I picked up my glass, swallowed the bitter taste, set it down, and stood up. Calm, deliberate, every step measured. They didn't deserve my tears. That night I walked out of their lives forever. And when I cut off every single bill they had grown accustomed to me paying, they finally understood my value. Too late. The truth is, some people only appreciate what you give them when you stop giving it. Boston at night was cold and silent. Rows of old streets slid past my car window. Neon lights from diners and gas stations stretching into long streaks of color. But before I tell you about that night and what came after, you need to understand how I ended up there in the first place. 3 years earlier, my life couldn't have been more different. Manhattan in autumn has a certain magic. The light turns golden, filtering through skyscrapers to touch the streets below. I remember standing in front of my little coffee shop, Maple and Pages, on opening day. The small potted maple tree I had placed by the entrance swayed gently in the breeze, a symbol of growth and independence. The shop wasn't large, just enough space for a few rows of tables, a quiet reading corner, and the faded silver espresso machine I had bought from a thrift store. But that place was my world. I had spent years saving from part-time jobs and scholarships to finally open Maple and Pages, where students, book lovers, and young couples came to find peace amid the city's chaos. Every morning I unlocked the door as sunlight streamed through the glass, falling on the long table, where regulars sat typing on laptops. I knew each customer by name, their orders, their stories, college students cramming for exams, elderly couples sharing a scone, writers finishing their manuscripts. They weren't just customers. They had become friends. Late nights I stayed behind balancing the books, wiping down tables, exhausted but happy. The shop smelled of fresh coffee beans and old books. The wooden shelves lined the walls, each book carefully selected. Some nights I'd curl up in the reading corner after closing, simply breathing in the life I'd created with my own hands. The cafe was my brainchild, my pride, proof that I could build a life of my own from nothing. I had no idea that a single phone call would destroy everything I had built. It was a late autumn evening. The cafe had just closed. Rain tapped gently against the windows as I counted the day's earnings. The phone rang, its sound harsh in the quiet space. My father's voice was heavy, stripped of the ease he usually carried. "Alexandra, we're in trouble." The house was drowning in debt. My mother's medical bills after emergency surgery had spiraled beyond their ability to pay. The bank was threatening foreclosure on the mortgage. The roof was so rotted it needed urgent repair. I could hear my mother coughing in the background, the weary sigh of my father. Even Natalie's silence. She was still in college, then unable to do anything but stand by. I sat motionless in the darkened cafe, those words sinking into me. My chest tightened with every detail. Memories of my childhood, the red brick house, the garden where I used to play, came flooding back alongside a crushing sense of responsibility. Not once did my father ask, "How are you doing?" Not once did he say, "I know you've worked hard for your cafe." Not once did he acknowledge that he was asking me to sacrifice my dream. Still, I didn't hesitate. Within a week, I decided to sell the cafe, handing everything over to a trusted friend in the business. The $200,000 I received was not much compared to the years I had poured into it. But I didn't dwell on that. All I thought about was the relief on my mother's face when she would no longer worry about hospital bills. The grateful nod from my father when the bank stopped sending collection notices. The day I took down the Maple and Pages sign was the hardest. I stood on a small ladder, carefully removing the wooden board I had hand painted. As I held it to my chest, a tear slipped down my cheek. I quickly wiped it away. No one was there to see it, but I had always been taught that tears were a luxury I couldn't afford. In my family, I was always the strong one, the responsible one, the one who had everything together. It started when I was 8 years old. I came home from school proudly clutching a test with a large A+ marked in red. My father barely glanced at it before turning his attention to Natalie, who was crying over a C in math. He spent the entire evening helping her while my achievement sat unnoticed on the kitchen counter. By 12, I was cooking dinner for the family when my mother worked late. At 15, I watched Natalie get a new phone for her birthday, while I received practical clothes for school. When I turned 16 and got my driver's license, my first task was to drive Natalie to her dance recitals and soccer practice. One afternoon, I overheard my father talking to a neighbor in the garden. "Alexandra, she'll be fine. She always figures things out on her own." Those words echoed in my mind for years. I had become an adult in the family before I was old enough to drive, the reliable one who needed no attention, no praise, no help. So when that phone call came, the path was already set. I wired the money cleared every debt-hired workers to repair the roof and kept aside a small amount for property taxes. Then I packed up my things, left New York, and returned to the old room in the house I had once left behind to chase my dream. I told myself it was only temporary, just a few months until things steadied again. But that temporary stay didn't last a few months. It stretched into 3 full years. From the moment I returned, every bill found its way to me: electricity, water, internet, home insurance, property taxes, even the smallest services like trash collection and cable television. All of it automatically deducted from my account. The total added up to $2,500 each month, as precise and steady as the ticking of a clock. I started searching for a more stable job to keep the cash flow going, forcing myself to walk away from my passion for coffee and books. I joined an import-export company, then later took a management role at a supermarket chain just to maintain income. None of these jobs ever gave me the same spark as running Maple and Pages, but I convinced myself it was the price of keeping the family safe. At first, my parents seemed grateful. My father would occasionally pat my shoulder and mutter a thank you before settling back down to watch baseball. My mother hugged me and said I was the backbone of the house. I didn't blame Natalie. She was young, fresh out of college, stumbling through the job hunt. But as months turned into years, something shifted. The thank yous stopped. The acknowledgments faded. My contributions became expected, invisible, like the air they breathed. Meanwhile, Natalie bought a new iPhone. My father upgraded his fishing equipment. My mother joined a book club that required expensive hardcovers each month. Not once did anyone mention where the money came from. My wallet grew thinner while their lives expanded. I became the invisible ATM, silently dispensing cash without recognition. Each night, I lay in my childhood bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if this was all my life would ever be. The savings from selling Maple and Pages were long gone. My salary barely covered the family expenses, with little left over. The dream of opening another cafe felt like a distant memory, fading with each passing month. Sometimes I would sketch coffee shop layouts on napkins during lunch breaks, only to crumple them up and toss them away. Dreams seemed like a luxury I could no longer afford. Then one day, browsing through job listings on my lunch break, I saw it. New York University was offering MBA scholarships for entrepreneurs who had owned small businesses. The application deadline was a week away. That night, I stayed up until dawn, crafting my application, pouring my heart into the essay about Maple and Pages, and what I had learned from the experience. When the acceptance letter arrived 2 months later with a substantial scholarship offer, I felt a flicker of the old fire returning. I walked into the living room where my family was watching TV and announced my news. I got accepted to NYU's MBA program. with a scholarship. My mother smiled politely. That's nice, dear. My father grunted without looking away from the baseball game. Natalie frowned. But who's going to pay the bills if you're in New York studying? That question hung in the air like a cloud of smoke, suffocating the moment that should have been a celebration. No congratulations, no pride, just concern about how my decision would affect their comfort. Still, I didn't waver. I'll figure it out. I always do. And I did. For the next 2 years, I commuted between Boston and New York, taking overnight buses to save on accommodation, working 2 part-time jobs alongside my studies, continuing to pay every bill for the house in Boston. My routine became a blur of classes, work study, and exhaustion. There were nights on those bus rides when I questioned everything. Was I chasing another dream that would eventually be sacrificed? Would I ever break free from the role of family provider? But then I would look at my textbooks, at the business plans I was developing, and find the strength to continue. The day I completed my final MBA exam was one of quiet triumph. No one from my family attended the ceremony. My mother had a book club meeting. My father claimed the drive was too long. Natalie had a date she couldn't reschedule. I sat among my classmates, many surrounded by beaming parents and siblings, and accepted my degree alone. One of my professors noticed and patted my shoulder. "No family today, Alexandra. They're here in spirit," I lied, forcing a smile. But I was determined to celebrate properly. I bought a beautiful cake with red roses symbolizing achievement and new beginnings. I drove back to Boston, rehearsing in my mind how I would announce my job offer from a prestigious consulting firm in Manhattan. This time would be different. This time they would see my value. This time they would understand that I needed to build my own life. I imagined their proud faces, perhaps even a tearful apology for having taken me for granted. The house was lit up when I arrived. Cars lined the driveway. My mother had invited neighbors and relatives to celebrate my graduation. The gesture touched me deeply. Maybe they did care after all. The dining room was filled with familiar faces. Aunts, uncles, family friends. The table was set with the good china wine glasses catching the light from the chandelier. "There she is," my mother announced as I entered. "Our MBA graduate." People clapped. My father nodded from the head of the table, a rare smile on his face. Natalie stood by the window texting on her phone. Everything seemed perfect. I carefully placed the cake at the center of the table. The red roses gleamed against the white frosting, a symbol of everything I had worked for. The conversation flowed around me. People asked about New York, about my plans. I shared my news about the consulting firm job, watching for my family's reactions. "That's in Manhattan," my father noted, his smile fading slightly. "So you'll be moving back there permanently?" Before I could answer, my aunt jumped in. "Alexandra has always been the ambitious one. Not surprised she's flying the nest again." "When would you start?" my mother asked, her fork pushing food around her plate. "2 weeks," I replied. "I've already found a small apartment I can afford." That's when I noticed Natalie had stopped texting. She was watching me with an odd expression, something between anger and fear. What I didn't know then was that earlier that evening she had overheard me talking on the phone about my plans to close my Boston bank account, to finally separate my finances completely from the family. As conversations continued around us, I saw her lean over and whisper something to my father. His expression darkened, but he shook his head slightly, as if telling her not to speak. But Natalie had never been good at holding back. The room was buzzing with conversation when she suddenly leaned back in her chair, her voice cutting through the chatter. "You're a burden. We want to live without you." The silence that followed was absolute. Forks paused midair. Conversations died mid-sentence. All eyes turned to Natalie, then to me. I felt the blood drain from my face. My heart hammered against my ribs. The word burden echoed in my ears, so opposite to what I had been to this family that it seemed almost comical. I looked at my father, waiting for him to correct her, to defend me. He simply sipped his wine, eyes cast down at his plate. My mother froze, her expression locked somewhere between embarrassment and panic. No one spoke. Not a single person at that table stood up for me. In that moment, I understood with perfect clarity what I had been to them all along. Not a daughter, not a sister, not even a person with dreams and needs. I had been a resource to be drained, a solution to their problems, an invisible wallet. The room seemed to spin around me, the chandelier lights blurred, the faces watching me merged into a single judgmental gaze. I reached for my water glass. My hand was steady, surprising me. I took a sip, feeling the cool liquid against my throat. Then I carefully set the glass down, pushed my chair back, and stood. Every movement was deliberate. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. "Thank you for making this so clear," I said, my voice calm despite the storm raging inside me. "Enjoy the cake." I walked to my old bedroom, closed the door quietly behind me, and leaned against it, finally allowing myself a moment of pure, unfiltered shock. Tears pressed against my eyes, but I blinked them back. They didn't deserve my tears. Not one drop. With mechanical precision, I packed a suitcase, my laptop, a few changes of clothes, my financial documents. I left behind everything else, including the framed photo of our family that had sat on my nightstand for years. As I carried my suitcase down the hallway, I could hear hushed voices from the dining room. Someone laughed nervously. My mother called my name, once her voice uncertain. I didn't respond. I slipped out through the back door into the cold Boston night. The air bit at my cheeks, but I welcomed the sharp sensation. It cleared my mind. My car waited in the driveway, faithful and ready, unlike my family. I placed my suitcase in the trunk, slid behind the wheel, and started the engine. The soft purr was comforting, like a friend saying, "I'm here." As I pulled away from the house, I didn't look in the rearview mirror. Not once. From that moment, I swore I would never go back to being the silent wallet, the invisible caretaker, the burden they claimed I was. But what about them? When the lights went out, the water stopped running, and the bills started piling up. Would they still think it was so easy to live without me? I drove without direction, not knowing where I would end up, only certain that I could not turn back. The streets of Boston blurred past my window. Places I had known all my life suddenly looked foreign, as if I were seeing them through a stranger's eyes. After nearly 10 miles, I stopped in front of a small roadside motel along the highway. Its worn-out sign flickered faintly. The single-story rooms lined up with dimly lit windows. I stepped into the front desk, booked a room with my credit card. The night manager barely glanced at me before handing over the key, hardly paying attention. I pulled my suitcase into room number 14, the door closing behind me with a dull thud. Lying in that motel room under the weak yellow glow of the lamp, I turned my face to the wall, letting the hum of the old air conditioner drone on like a sad refrain. The bed was nothing like my comfortable mattress at home, but it offered something far more valuable: freedom. Sleep came and went, leaving me with overlapping fragments of memory, pulling me back into years I thought I had buried. The image of Maple and Pages surfaced so vividly, I could almost smell the roasted coffee beans and feel the fine layer of dust clinging to the old books on the wooden shelves. I remembered the day I had signed the final papers to sell the cafe. My hand had trembled slightly as I wrote my signature, finalizing the end of my dream. The new owner, Sophie, had been a regular customer, someone who understood what the place meant to me. "I'll take good care of it," she had promised. "And when you're ready to come back to the coffee world, there's always a place for you." I had nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The $200,000 check felt heavy in my pocket, money that would soon disappear into my family's debts like water into sand. As dawn broke, filtering weak light through the thin motel curtains, I made a decision. I reached for my laptop and logged into my bank account. The interface was familiar, showing the automatic payments scheduled for the coming month: electricity, water, internet, home insurance, property taxes, cable TV, all set to drain from my account like they had for the past 3 years. One by one, I canceled them. Each click felt like unlocking a shackle from around my wrists. With each cancellation, a weight lifted from my shoulders. By the time the sun had fully risen, casting long shadows across the motel room floor, I had cut every financial tie to the house in Boston. My phone had been buzzing periodically throughout the night. Text messages from my mother asking where I was. One from my father, unusually direct: We need to talk. Nothing from Natalie. I ignored them all. Until mid-morning when my father called. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Perhaps a need for closure. Alexandra. His voice was tight controlled. The electricity bill is due today. No, are you okay? No, I'm sorry for what happened. Just a reminder of my financial obligation. I took a deep breath. You said I was a burden, so I'm setting you free. What your sister said was in the heat of the moment. She didn't mean. She meant it and you didn't correct her. A long pause. We need you to pay the bills, Alexandra. Your mother's medication. You have jobs, Natalie has a degree. Figure it out. Is this how you repay us for raising you? His voice rose indignation replacing the controlled tone. By abandoning your family when we need you. The irony of his words hit me like a physical blow. For 3 years, I had abandoned myself, my dreams, my future to support them, and not once had they acknowledged the sacrifice. I gave you everything, I said quietly. My dream, my savings. 3 years of my life, and last night you couldn't even defend me. Alexandra. Goodbye, Dad. I hung up my hand, trembling slightly. Then I blocked his number, and my mother's, and Natalie's. One by one, I severed the digital ties that had bound me to them. In that moment, I felt both terrified and liberated. I had no plan, no safety net, just a suitcase of clothes, my laptop, and the determination to rebuild my life on my own terms. I checked out of the motel and started driving toward New York, the city where I had once built something beautiful, the city where I might do it again. But first, I needed to understand what had happened. How had I become the family ATM? When had my value been reduced to what I could provide rather than who I was? The pattern was clear, now looking back. It had started in childhood with the assumption that I was self-sufficient while Natalie needed protection and support. It had continued through my teenage years with the expectation that I would help with household responsibilities while Natalie focused on her social life and hobbies. And it had culminated in those 3 years after selling Maple and Pages, when I had become the invisible financial support system for the entire family. They had never seen me. Not really. They had seen what I could do for them, but never asked what I needed in return. Not even simple acknowledgement. As I drove toward New York, the realization settled into my bones. I had been complicit in my own invisibility. I had never demanded recognition, never established boundaries, never said no when I should have. But that was about to change. The woman driving toward Manhattan was not the same one who had meekly sold her dream to save her family. This woman had finally seen the truth, and there was no going back. What I didn't know then was that my decision to cut financial ties would set in motion a chain of events that would transform not just my life, but the lives of everyone in my family. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is to stop rescuing them. The truth is, some people only learn to swim when the water rises. The first week after leaving Boston was a blur of motel rooms and long drives. Each night I checked into a different place, paying cash when possible. It wasn't that I feared my family would come looking for me. They wouldn't. What they wanted was my money, not me. But I needed distance, both physical and emotional. I would lie awake in unfamiliar beds, staring at water stains on ceiling tiles, replaying Natalie's words in my mind. You're a burden. We want to live without you. The irony was almost laughable. I had been their financial foundation for years, the invisible wallet, the safety net, yet somehow I was the burden. My phone remained off most of the time. When I did turn it on, the notifications would flood in. Voicemails, text messages, emails. I scrolled through them with detached curiosity, as if reading about a stranger's life. My mother. Alexandra, where are you? Please call us. My father. The electricity bill is past due. Did you forget? My mother again. The power company called. Is there a problem with your payment? Not one message asked if I was okay. Not one expressed concern for my well-being. Just panic about the bills. Natalie didn't contact me at all. Her silence spoke volumes. On the seventh day, I found myself crossing the George Washington Bridge into Manhattan. The city skyline rose before me, familiar yet different. This wasn't the triumphant return I had imagined when I left with my MBA degree, but it was a return nonetheless. I checked into a modest hotel in Midtown, knowing I couldn't afford it for long. My savings were limited. The job offer from the consulting firm wouldn't start for another 2 weeks. I needed to find a more permanent solution. That evening, sitting on the edge of the hotel bed, I finally answered one call. From my father. His voice came through immediately tense and accusatory. "Alexandra, what's going on? The electricity has been shut off. Your mother can't keep her medication refrigerated." No hello, no how are you, just demands. "I'm not paying the bills anymore," I said, my voice calmer than I felt. "What do you mean we're counting on you? Your mother needs her medication. The mortgage is due next week." "You said I was a burden." A pause. "That was Natalie, not me." "And you didn't correct her. You said nothing." Another pause, longer this time. "She was emotional. We all were. You can't just abandon your family over a few harsh words." I closed my eyes, feeling a strange sense of clarity wash over me. It wasn't just words. It was the truth you've all been living for years. I give, and you take and take. Not once did any of you ask what it cost me. "We're your family," he insisted, as if that explained everything. "Family supports each other." "Support goes both ways. When did you ever support me?" "We raised you, put a roof over your head, sent you to college." "I had scholarships for college. I worked part-time jobs, and for the past 3 years I've been putting a roof over your heads." His voice hardened. "So this is what revenge you're punishing us?" "No," I said softly. "This is me choosing myself for once. You have jobs, you have resources. Figure it out just like I always had to." I could hear his breathing heavy and agitated. "Your mother is crying every night. Is that what you wanted?" The guilt trip. So familiar, so predictable. But this time it didn't work. What I wanted was to be seen as a daughter, not a bank account. "Goodbye, Dad." I hung up before he could respond and blocked his number. Then I sat in the silent hotel room waiting for the guilt to overwhelm me. But instead, I felt something unexpected: relief. For the first time in 3 years, perhaps longer, I was free. No one's bills to pay but my own. No one's expectations to meet but my own. No one's dreams to sacrifice but my own. The next morning, I began my search for an apartment. Manhattan real estate was as brutal as ever, but I was determined. I couldn't afford much with my savings dwindling, but I needed a place to call my own before starting the new job. After 5 days of relentless searching, I found it. A tiny one-bedroom in the East Village. The building was old, the elevator unreliable, the kitchen barely big enough for a microwave. But it had one perfect feature: a window seat overlooking a small courtyard where sunlight streamed in for hours each morning. When I signed the lease, the real estate agent looked at me curiously. "Most people your age want roommates to split the cost. You sure you want to live alone?" "It's expensive." I smiled. "I'm sure. Some things are worth the price." The apartment required a security deposit plus first month's rent, nearly depleting my remaining savings. I applied for a small personal loan to cover furnishings and living expenses until my first paycheck. My credit score was excellent, thanks to years of responsible financial management, even while carrying my family's burden. The day I moved in, I had nothing but a suitcase of clothes, my laptop, and a brand new air mattress still in its box. But the empty space felt like potential rather than lack. This was mine. Every square foot, every decision. Mine alone. I sat on the window seat that first evening watching the sun set over the courtyard. A strange thought occurred to me. I had no idea what my own taste was. For years, every purchase had been practical, economical, chosen to maximize the money left for family obligations. I had never bought anything simply because I loved it. Tomorrow, I decided I would buy one thing purely for joy, not necessity, not practicality, just joy. That thing turned out to be a small potted maple tree, similar to the one I had once placed outside Maple and Page's. I set it on the window seat, its delicate leaves catching the morning light, a reminder of what I had built before, what I could build again. Meanwhile, in Boston, the consequences of my departure were unfolding. My mother stood in the kitchen. The light switch flicked uselessly up and down. The electricity had been off for 3 days now. The refrigerator contents had spoiled. Her medication requiring refrigeration had been moved to a neighbor's house, a daily walk of embarrassment to retrieve the doses she needed. My father sat at the dining room table, checkbook open before him, a calculator at his side. The numbers refused to add up. Mortgage, water bill, property taxes, car payments, credit cards, insurance. The total monthly expenses were staggering, far more than he had realized. For years, he had lived in the comfortable illusion that their lifestyle was sustainable on their income. He hadn't bothered to look closely at the finances because he hadn't needed to. Alexandra took care of it all. Now the truth lay exposed in columns of numbers that wouldn't balance. His income as a part-time accounting consultant, plus my mother's disability benefits, fell short by over $2,000 each month, the gap that I had been silently filling. Natalie sat in her bedroom, the space illuminated by candles. Her phone battery had died, and without electricity, she couldn't charge it. Cut off from her social media accounts, from her friends, from the digital world she inhabited so comfortably, she felt a growing unease. She had been job hunting without success for months. Her liberal arts degree hadn't opened the door she expected. Now, without electricity, even online applications were impossible. The silence of the house, broken only by her parents' hushed, tense conversations, was becoming unbearable. That night, my father called an emergency family meeting. In the candlelit dining room, he laid out the situation in stark terms. "We need to make changes, significant ones." My mother twisted her hands in her lap. "How bad is it?" "We're short over $2,000 a month. The mortgage is due in 5 days. We don't have enough to cover it." Natalie's face paled in the flickering light. "Can't you take out a loan? Use a credit card." My father shook his head. "Our credit cards are nearly maxed out already. No bank will approve a loan with our current debt-to-income ratio." He paused, the professional financial advisor momentarily visible beneath the desperate father. "We've been living beyond our means for years, cushioned by Alexandra's contributions." "So what do we do?" my mother asked. "We have 3 options. Sell the house and downsize dramatically. Take in renters for the spare bedrooms, or—" he looked directly at Natalie. "Everyone who can work works. Immediately." The implication hung in the air between them. Natalie's prolonged job search, her selectivity about positions, her refusal of menial work had been tolerated because it hadn't seemed urgent. Now it was. "That's not fair," Natalie protested. "I have a degree. I can't just work at McDonald's." My father's patience, already stretched thin, snapped. "Your sister had a successful business that she sold to save this family. She worked jobs she hated for 3 years to keep this roof over our heads. And how did we repay her? You called her a burden, and we sat silent." The truth spoken aloud at last fell heavily into the room. My mother began to cry softly. "We have to apologize to her. Ask her to come back." "She's blocked our numbers," my father said. "And even if she hadn't, do you really think she'd come back after what happened?" Natalie stood up abruptly. "So this is my fault now? You're blaming me?" "We're all to blame," my father said. "We all took her for granted. We all accepted her sacrifices without question. But yes, Natalie, your words at the dinner were the final straw." Natalie stormed out of the room, slamming her bedroom door hard enough to make the candle flames dance. The next day, the water was shut off too. Back in New York, I was preparing for my first day at the consulting firm. My new wardrobe, purchased with careful consideration of my budget, hung ready in the tiny closet. My resume had been polished to highlight my MBA and previous business ownership. On paper, I looked impressive, accomplished. Inside, I felt like an imposter. What if they discovered that I had failed at my first business? What if my MBA knowledge wasn't enough for the corporate world? What if I couldn't support myself? After all, these fears followed me into the gleaming office building on my first day up the elevator to the 28th floor, and into the orientation room where other new hires sat with similarly nervous expressions. The day passed in a blur of introductions, paperwork, and corporate policies. By 5 o'clock, my head was spinning with information overload. As I gathered my things to leave, my new manager approached. "Alexandra, a word?" My heart sank. Had I already done something wrong? She led me to her office, closed the door, and gestured for me to sit. Your resume mentions you owned a business before your MBA. Maple and Page is correct. I nodded, unsure where this was going. I used to stop in there occasionally. Lovely place, great coffee, better book selection. The coincidence startled me. You were a customer. She smiled. Not a regular, but yes. I was disappointed when it closed. She leaned forward slightly. May I ask what happened? It seemed to be doing well. For a moment, I considered giving the sanitized version. Family emergency, change of direction. But something in her direct gaze made me opt for honesty. I sold it to help my family through a financial crisis. The money went to pay off their debts. She nodded thoughtfully. That's quite a sacrifice. And now you're here. Yes, starting over. Well, that entrepreneurial experience is valuable, Alexandra. More valuable than many realize. Keep that perspective alive here. Corporate consulting can get formulaic. Fresh eyes are an asset. As I left the building that evening, her words stayed with me. My failure wasn't really a failure at all. It was a choice, a sacrifice, and perhaps in some way an investment in lessons I couldn't have learned otherwise. The next few weeks settled into a rhythm. Work during the day, quiet evenings in my sparse apartment. I began adding small touches to the space: a colorful throw pillow for the window seat, a set of blue ceramic mugs, a small bookshelf that I gradually filled with titles I had always wanted to read but never had time for. Each purchase was deliberate, chosen because it spoke to me, not because it was practical or economical. My taste, I discovered, ran toward clean lines, natural materials, and unexpected touches of color. The apartment slowly transformed from an empty shell into a reflection of myself. Weekend mornings became a sacred ritual. Coffee brewed in my small French press, reading on the window seat beside my growing maple tree. No one needing anything from me. No obligations except those I chose. I should have been happy. I was building the independent life I had wanted. My job was challenging but rewarding. My apartment was becoming a home. Yet sometimes in quiet moments, an unexpected hollowness would open up inside me. Not guilt exactly, but a sense of incompleteness. As if in cutting ties with my family, I had also cut away some essential part of myself. One Sunday, restless and seeking distraction, I decided to visit my old neighborhood. I told myself it was simple curiosity. How was Maple and Pages doing under Sophie's ownership? Had the area changed? But deeper motivations stirred beneath the surface reasons. The subway ride to the old neighborhood felt like time travel. As I emerged onto the familiar street, memories flooded back. Morning walks to the cafe, evening returns with bags of fresh coffee beans, the changing seasons marked by the window displays I had carefully arranged. And there it was, Maple and Pages. The sign was the same, though freshly painted. The window display featured summer reading recommendations. Through the glass, I could see customers at the tables, laptops, open coffee cups steaming. I stood across the street watching the life continue in the space I had created. The ache I felt was complex. Pride that the business was thriving, grief that it was no longer mine, nostalgia for the person I had been when I opened those doors for the first time. As I stood there, a young woman exited the cafe, a to-go cup in one hand, a book in the other. Something about her caught my attention: the focused expression, the slight furrow between her brows, the determined set of her shoulders. She reminded me of myself at 24, full of ambition and certainty. She noticed me watching and paused. Are you waiting for someone? No, I said quickly. Just remembering. She looked at me more closely, then at the cafe, understanding dawning. Were you a regular here? A simple question with a complicated answer. I was the original owner, actually. Her eyes widened. You're Alexandra Wilson. I nodded, surprised she knew my name. Sophie mentions you sometimes, says you created the perfect blueprint for what a cafe bookstore should be. She shifted her coffee to extend her hand. I'm Charlotte. I work here part-time while I finish my business degree. We ended up sitting on a nearby bench talking for over an hour. Charlotte was 24, completing her MBA at NYU, dreaming of opening her own cafe someday. The parallels to my own past were uncanny. "What would you do differently?" she asked earnestly. "If you could go back and start Maple and Pages again?" The question caught me off guard. No one had ever asked about my business in this way before. Not as a failure to be explained away, but as a valuable experience to learn from. "I would have started smaller," I said after some thought. "Less inventory, simpler menu, fewer staff, room to grow organically instead of trying to be perfect from day one. And," I hesitated, then continued, "I would have set clearer boundaries between my business finances and personal life." Charlotte nodded, absorbing this like the earnest student she was. "Sophie mentioned you sold because of a family emergency. That must have been a tough decision." "The toughest," I admitted. But looking back, I wonder if there might have been other options I didn't consider. Ways to help my family without sacrificing everything I'd built. Like what? Like a partial sale, a business loan using the cafe as collateral, or simply saying no. I smiled ruefully. Saying no was not my strong suit back then. Our conversation shifted to books we'd read, coffee brewing techniques, customer service, philosophies. It felt good to talk about these things again, to connect with someone who shared my passions. As we prepared to part ways, Charlotte asked hesitantly, "Would you be willing to get coffee again sometime? I have so many questions about starting a business. It would be amazing to learn from someone who's actually done it." For the first time in months, I felt a spark of the old joy, the feeling of creating something, contributing something meaningful. I'd like that. Walking back to the subway, I felt lighter somehow. The hollowness had receded, replaced by a quiet excitement. Perhaps there were ways to reclaim parts of my old life without returning to old patterns. Meanwhile, in Boston, the Wilson household was undergoing a dramatic transformation. My father had returned to full-time work, taking an accounting position at a firm he'd once considered beneath his qualifications. The salary wasn't what he'd earned in his prime, but it was steady. My mother had started selling her handcrafted jewelry online, a hobby turned necessity. Each evening, she sat at the kitchen table stringing beads and wire by candlelight until the electricity could be restored. And Natalie had finally found employment. Not the prestigious marketing position she'd hoped for, but a night shift at the local supermarket. The work was physically demanding, the hours lonely, the pay minimal. But it was a job. Their combined incomes were just enough to keep the mortgage current and slowly chip away at the other bills. The electricity had been restored after 2 weeks of darkness. The water followed a few days later. But their lifestyle had contracted dramatically. No more restaurant meals, no more premium cable channels, no more spontaneous purchases. Every dollar was accounted for, every expense scrutinized. The comfortable cushion that my contributions had provided was gone, revealing the hard edges of financial reality. One evening, as Natalie walked home from her shift at 2 a.m., exhaustion weighing on her shoulders, a realization struck her with unexpected force. This was how I had felt for 3 years, working jobs I didn't love, watching my money disappear into family expenses, sacrificing my time, my energy, my dreams. For the first time, Natalie felt a glimmer of understanding, not just intellectual acknowledgement, but genuine emotional comprehension of what my life had been like. She arrived home to find my father still awake, poring over bills at the dining room table, the same table where she had called me a burden. "Dad," she said quietly, "I think we need to apologize to Alexandra. Really apologize." He looked up, the circles under his eyes pronounced in the harsh overhead light. "She's blocked our numbers, our emails. She doesn't want to hear from us. Then we write letters, real ones on paper. We tell her the truth, which is," Natalie swallowed hard, "that we used her, that we took everything she gave and never thought about what it cost her, that we were selfish and entitled and wrong." My father's shoulders sagged. The admission of fault didn't come easily to him, but the evidence was undeniable. "She may never forgive us." "Maybe not," Natalie agreed, "but we still need to say it. For her. And for us." Back in New York, my life was beginning to expand beyond work in my apartment. Charlotte and I had started meeting regularly for coffee, our conversations ranging from business strategies to personal histories. Through her, I met other young entrepreneurs, people with dreams similar to what mine had been. They asked questions, sought advice, listened to my experiences with genuine interest. For the first time since selling Maple and Pages, I felt valued for my knowledge, not just my financial contributions. One evening, Charlotte invited me to her apartment for dinner. It was a fourth floor walk up in Washington Heights, smaller even than my place, but filled with light and creative energy. Plants crowded the windowsills. Bookshelves overflowed with business texts and novels. The tiny kitchen smelled of garlic and herbs. As we ate pasta at her folding table, Charlotte shared her latest idea. I've been thinking about spaces, specifically how many vacant storefronts there are in certain neighborhoods post-pandemic. I nodded, intrigued. Rent should be negotiable in those areas. Exactly. Her eyes lit up. And I've been looking at one in particular. It's small, but the location is good. High foot traffic near a subway stop. The previous tenant was a failed smoothie shop, so the basic infrastructure for food service is already there. Sounds promising. Are you thinking of making an offer? She hesitated, twirling pasta around her fork. Actually, I was wondering if you might want to look at it with me. Give me your professional opinion. Of course, I agreed easily. There's more, she said, setting down her fork. I've been saving since undergraduate. I have enough for a decent down payment, but not enough to fully launch. I'd need a business partner. The implication hung in the air between us. Charlotte, I'm flattered, but just think about it, she rushed on. It wouldn't be Maple and Pages 2.0. It would be something new, something we build together with clear agreements and boundaries from the start. She smiled sheepishly. I've learned from your mistakes. I laughed despite myself. You certainly cut to the chase. Life's too short not to. Look, no pressure, but at least come see the space with me tomorrow after work. I agreed, telling myself it was simple curiosity, just professional advice for a friend. But as I lay in bed that night, thoughts raced through my mind. The possibility of returning to the cafe world both thrilled and terrified me. What if I failed again? What if something happened and I had to sell again? But this would be different, wouldn't it? A partnership with clear boundaries, a smaller initial investment, and most importantly, no family financial obligations threatening to consume everything I built. The next day, I met Charlotte outside the vacant storefront. The location was indeed excellent, just as she had described. The interior needed work, but the bones were good. High ceilings, large windows, a workable layout. As we walked the space, I found myself automatically planning. This wall could come down. The counter would work better along this side. The espresso machine should face the entrance so customers could see and smell the coffee being made. Charlotte watched me with a growing smile. You're doing it already. Planning, creating. I stopped suddenly self-conscious. Force of habit. It's not a bad habit, it's expertise. She looked around the empty space. Can't you feel it? The potential here, I could. That was the problem. The familiar excitement was building in my chest, the vision of what could be taking shape in my mind. It would be so easy to get swept away in that vision, to risk everything again. I need time to think, I said finally. This is a big decision. Of course. Charlotte looked disappointed but understanding. Take all the time you need. That weekend, a different sort of surprise awaited me. Checking my mailbox in the apartment lobby, I found an actual letter handwritten on cream-colored stationery. The return address was Boston. The handwriting unmistakably Natalie's. My heart thudded against my ribs as I carried the letter upstairs. For a long moment, I simply sat with it on the window seat, turning it over in my hands, unsure if I even wanted to read it. Finally, curiosity won out. I carefully opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. Alexandra, it began. I'm sorry. Those 3 words, so simple yet so unexpected, made my eyes sting with sudden tears. Natalie continued, her handwriting shakier than I remembered. I've been selfish. I failed to see what you did for our family, what you sacrificed. Now I understand a little better. She described her new job at the supermarket, the exhaustion of night shifts, the struggle to make ends meet. I know this is just a fraction of what you carried for years. I understand now that you gave up everything for us. Your cafe, your dream, your independence. I read on a complex mix of emotions swirling through me. Validation that my sacrifices were finally recognized. Anger that it took my departure for them to see it. Sadness for the years lost. And beneath it all, a tiny, dangerous flicker of hope. I wish I had stayed silent that night, she wrote. I was scared. Scared of losing the safety net you'd always provided. Scared of having to stand on my own feet. But that doesn't excuse what I said or how we all treated you. The letter ended with a plea. I hope someday to be forgiven. Not to go back to how things were, but to build something new, something better, with respect. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the drawer of my bedside table next to old photos of happier family times. My eyes welled with tears, but I wiped them away quickly. I understood that if I cracked open the smallest door for Natalie, I would risk being pulled back into the same toxic cycle. She would lean on me again. My parents would grow accustomed to my support again. And months or years later, I'd find myself once more in the role of the invisible wallet. I couldn't go back. I had come too far, and I had begun to learn how to love myself. That evening, I told Charlotte about the letter over the phone. Her concern was immediate and genuine. Are you going to reply? No, I said firmly. If I respond, I'll fall back into the same trap. I've sacrificed too much already, and I've learned that love without fairness only turns into chains. Charlotte was quiet for a moment. I think you're right. Forgiveness doesn't mean returning to the place that hurt you. The next day, I carried Natalie's letter out to my small balcony. The autumn sun was gentle on my face as I read it once more, before carefully putting it away. I didn't tear it up. I didn't burn it. I wanted to keep it as proof. Not proof of remorse, but proof of my own resolve. Whenever I felt myself softening, I could take it out and remind myself that apologies without action are nothing more than another weight to carry. In the quiet of that night, I sat by the window gazing down at the glowing streets of Manhattan. My heart felt strangely at ease. I didn't hate Natalie anymore, nor my parents. What I felt was a necessary distance, a boundary. I hoped that one day they would truly learn to stand on their own feet. But I knew that was no longer my responsibility. Family cannot be built on one-sided dependence. Family only has meaning when it comes with fairness and respect. Without those, it is nothing but a burden. And I was too exhausted to carry it any longer. As the night breeze slipped through my window, ruffling the leaves of my small maple tree, I closed my eyes and told myself that this silence was my final step out of the shadows of the past. I didn't need another apology. What I needed was the peace I had fought to reclaim, and I would protect it with every ounce of resolve I possessed. The next morning, I called Charlotte. About that storefront, I said without preamble. Let's talk business partnership. Real partnership with contracts and clear boundaries. Her delighted laugh warmed something in me that had been cold for too long. I knew you wouldn't be able to resist the call of coffee beans for long. There would be conditions, I warned. Equal investment, equal say, everything documented legally. Absolutely, she agreed. I wouldn't want it any other way. Partners, not saviors. Partners, I repeated, testing the word, liking how it felt. Not saviors. And in that moment, standing in my small apartment with the morning sun streaming through the window, I realized I was ready to take a risk again. Not the same risk as before, not with the same blind trust or lack of boundaries, but a calculated risk with eyes wide open and terms clearly defined. The invisible wallet was becoming visible again, but this time on my own terms. This time, I would not disappear. Life has a way of offering second chances in unexpected packages. Standing in the empty storefront with Charlotte, I felt both déjà vu and something entirely new. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, creating patterns on the worn wooden floor. The space was smaller than Maple and Page's had been, but somehow that felt right. More manageable, less grandiose. We could put the espresso bar here, Charlotte said, gesturing toward the back wall, and bookshelves along this side. Maybe a community bulletin board by the entrance. I walked the perimeter slowly measuring distances with my eyes calculating flow patterns in my head, the habits of a business owner returning like muscle memory. The rent, I asked practical considerations foremost. Below market, the landlord is desperate after 3 failed businesses in this space, and they're offering 3 months free to start. Charlotte's eyes sparkled with enthusiasm. Plus, I already spoke with the building inspector. The electrical and plumbing are solid, no major renovations needed. I ran my hand along the counter, feeling the smooth surface beneath my fingertips. What would we call it? Charlotte smiled. I've been thinking about that. How does rebirth sound? The name resonated immediately, striking a chord deep within me. Rebirth, a second chance, a new beginning. With a maple tree logo, I suggested softly. A small one with new leaves sprouting. Perfect, Charlotte beamed. So, are you in? I took a deep breath. The old Alexandra would have jumped in immediately, eager to please, afraid to disappoint. But I wasn't that person anymore. Let me review the numbers first, I said. And we need a solid business plan. Clear roles, written agreements about financial responsibilities. I met her gaze directly. I need to know that this is a true partnership, Charlotte. Equal risk, equal reward, equal voice. She nodded without hesitation. Absolutely. I wouldn't want it any other way. We'll get everything in writing legally binding. No assumptions, no gray areas. That evening back in my apartment, I created a detailed spreadsheet. Initial investment required, monthly operational costs, projected revenue based on conservative estimates, break-even timeline, every figure carefully calculated, every assumption questioned. This wasn't just about protecting my finances. It was about protecting my heart. The numbers looked promising. With our combined savings and a small business loan, we could launch without overextending ourselves. If the business failed, it would be disappointing, but not financially devastating. I could walk away intact. That was the key difference. This time I had an exit strategy. This time I wasn't investing everything. I called Charlotte the next day. I'm in with conditions. Name them, she said immediately. First, we form an LLC with a comprehensive operating agreement. Second, we each maintain separate personal finances from the business. Third, we agree on a conflict resolution process up front. I paused. And finally, we start small. Minimal debt, minimal staff, room to grow organically. Done, 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 and done, Charlotte agreed. Anything else? I thought for a moment. Yes, we make it beautiful. Not expensive, but beautiful. A place people want to linger. I could hear the smile in her voice. That was already part of my plan. I've been collecting ideas for months. Over the next few weeks, we threw ourselves into planning. Meetings with lawyers to form the LLC, visits to the bank for loan applications. Hours spent refining the business plan, the menu, the book selection strategy. We created mood boards, supply chains, marketing plans. Every detail considered, every decision mutual. It was exhilarating. The creative energy I had missed since selling Maple and Pages flowed freely again, but now tempered with hard-won wisdom. I found myself looking forward to our planning sessions, energized rather than drained by the work. One Saturday afternoon, as we sat surrounded by fabric swatches and paint samples in my apartment, Charlotte looked up suddenly. You're different when you talk about the cafe. Your whole face lights up. I hadn't realized it was so visible. It feels good to create again. It's more than that, she insisted. It's like you become more you. Her observation lingered with me. Who was I really? For so long, my identity had been tied to what I could provide for others. The responsible daughter, the family bank, the invisible support system. Even with Maple and Pages, part of my motivation had been proving my worth through achievement. Now approaching 40 with clear-eyed experience, I was discovering a version of myself unfettered by others' expectations. A version that could say no without guilt, that could pursue joy without apology, that could establish boundaries without fear. It was a revelation, and it infused our cafe planning with an authenticity I had never allowed myself before. Meanwhile, life continued to unfold in unexpected ways. One crisp autumn morning, while picking up coffee beans from a wholesaler to test for our cafe, I literally collided with Jordan, the director of a local community center. "I'm so sorry," I apologized, stooping to help him gather the papers I had knocked from his hands. Entirely my fault, he insisted with a warm smile. I was reading while walking a dangerous habit my mother always warned me about. As we sorted his scattered documents, I noticed they included curriculum plans for small business development workshops. My interest must have shown on my face. Are you familiar with small business education? He asked. You could say that. I owned a cafe bookstore for 3 years before selling it, and I'm in the process of opening a new one with a partner. His eyebrows rose. Really? Would you be interested in speaking to my entrepreneurship class? They're mostly young people from the neighborhood looking to start their first businesses. Real-world experience would be invaluable to them. The offer caught me off guard. Me, a teacher. But the idea took root, immediately resonating with something I hadn't known. I was missing the opportunity to transform my failures and successes into lessons for others. I'd like that, I heard myself say. When is your next class? The following Thursday evening found me standing nervously before 15 eager faces at the community center. Ages ranged from 18 to 50s, backgrounds diverse, but all united by entrepreneurial dreams and limited resources. The first thing you should know about starting a business, I began, is that passion isn't enough. Neither is a good idea. You need systems, processes, a clear understanding of cash flow, and perhaps most importantly, boundaries. For the next hour, I shared my journey with Maple and Pages, the triumphs and the mistakes, the joy of creation and the pain of loss. I didn't sanitize the story or present myself as a flawless business guru. Instead, I offered something more valuable: honesty about the pitfalls and how to avoid them. When the session ended, several students lingered to ask questions. Their hunger for practical knowledge, for someone to guide them past the obvious errors, was palpable. As I answered their questions, something shifted within me. The loss of Maple and Pages, which had felt like pure failure for so long, was being transmuted into something valuable. My experience, even the painful parts, especially the painful parts, had worth. Jordan approached as the last student departed. That was excellent, the best guest speaker we've had. He hesitated. Would you consider making this a regular thing? Perhaps a 6-week course. We can offer a modest stipend. The offer was unexpected, but oddly right, like a puzzle piece clicking into place. I'd need to work around the cafe launch schedule, but yes, I'd love to. When walking home that evening, the Manhattan skyline glittering against the night sky, I felt a sense of expansion. My life, which had contracted so severely during those years of supporting my family, was unfurling again, not just with the new cafe, but in directions I hadn't anticipated: teaching, mentoring, sharing. For the first time, I was forming connections based not on what I could give, but on mutual exchange, equal partnerships, balanced relationships. The difference was profound. As Rebirth took shape and my teaching role at the community center developed, I began to form friendships beyond Charlotte. Jordan, the community center director, invited me to staff gatherings. Students from my class shared their business milestones. Fellow entrepreneurs in the neighborhood stopped by the cafe space to offer advice or assistance. None of these relationships came with the unspoken expectation that I would be the perpetual giver, the one who sacrificed while others took. Instead, there was reciprocity, give and take, support flowing in both directions. I hadn't realized how starved I had been for this kind of balance until I experienced it. One evening, about 6 weeks after my departure from Boston, I was grocery shopping when my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Normally, I would let it go to voicemail, but something prompted me to answer. Alexandra, it's Sophie from Maple and Pages. My former cafe, my former dream. Sophie, hi. Is everything okay? Everything's fine. I'm actually calling because I heard you might be opening a new place. Charlotte mentioned it when she was in last week. I tensed slightly. Was this a territorial call? It's a different concept, different neighborhood. We wouldn't be competing directly. Oh, I'm not worried about that, Sophie laughed. Actually, I was calling to offer help. I have some extra equipment from when I expanded the kitchen last month. A second espresso machine, some display shelves, a few cafe tables. All in good condition, just not the right style for my update. They're yours if you want them. The generosity stunned me. That's incredibly kind, but I couldn't possibly accept without paying you. Consider it passing along the goodwill. You sold me a thriving business at a fair price when you could have asked for much more. This is just balancing the scales a bit. After some negotiation, we agreed that I would pay a nominal amount for the equipment well below market value, but enough to acknowledge the exchange. As I hung up the contrast with my family, dynamics couldn't have been more stark. Here was someone recognizing value, acknowledging past generosity, and responding in kind. No entitlement, no expectation that I would simply give without receiving. It was a small interaction, but it reinforced the new pattern I was establishing in my life: reciprocity, fairness, respect. The weeks flew by in a flurry of activity: legal paperwork finalized, loans approved, lease signed, renovations begun. Charlotte and I worked side by side, painting walls, assembling shelves, testing recipes. Every decision was made together, every challenge faced as a team. We set the grand opening date for November 15th, allowing ourselves 2 months for preparation. Flyers were distributed throughout the neighborhood. Social media accounts launched. A small advertisement placed in the local paper. The response was encouraging, with neighborhood residents stopping by during renovations to express excitement about the new cafe. Amid this joyful chaos, another letter arrived from Boston, this one in my mother's handwriting. I sat with it unopened for several days, unsure whether to read it at all. Natalie's letter had stirred up complex emotions that I had worked hard to process. Did I want to reopen that wound? Finally, curiosity won out. One quiet evening, I carefully opened the envelope and unfolded the single page inside. "My dearest Alexandra," it began. My mother's elegant script flowed across the paper, so familiar, it made my throat tighten. I have started this letter a dozen times, searching for the right words. There are none that can adequately express my regret for the way we treated you, for the way I treated you. A mother should protect her children, all her children. I failed you terribly. She went on to describe the changes in the household since my departure. My father working full-time again, her own small jewelry business, Natalie's job at the supermarket. We are managing, but more importantly, we are learning. Learning what it means to be self-sufficient. Learning the true cost of the lifestyle we took for granted. Learning too late the value of what you sacrificed for us. The letter continued with updates about family members, neighbors, the house itself. Neutral information, carefully avoiding emotional manipulation. Then near the end, a shift in tone. I don't write asking for forgiveness or for you to return to the role you never should have been forced to assume. I write because you deserve to hear these words: I am proud of you. Not for what you gave us, but for who you are. Strong, principled, brave enough to walk away when walking away was necessary. Tears blurred my vision as I reached the final lines. Whatever you choose, whether to allow us back into your life or to maintain the distance you have every right to keep, please know this: I love you. Not for what you can provide, but simply because you are my daughter, because you are Alexandra. I set the letter down, emotions churning. Unlike Natalie's letter, this one asked for nothing, expected nothing. It was simply an acknowledgement of truth long overdue. I didn't respond immediately. The lessons and boundaries were still too fresh, the memory of exploitation too raw. But I tucked the letter away with more care than I had Natalie's, a small crack opening in the wall I had built between myself and my family. The day before Rebirth's grand opening, a surprise package arrived at the cafe. Inside was a beautiful ceramic planter containing a small maple tree similar to the one in my apartment, but more mature, its leaves a brilliant red. The card read simply, "For new beginnings, with love, Jordan." Over the past weeks, Jordan and I had developed a friendship that was gradually deepening into something more. Nothing rushed or desperate, but a slow, careful exploration of compatibility and connection. He respected my boundaries, never pushed for more than I was ready to give, and seemed genuinely interested in who I was beyond what I could offer. The thoughtfulness of the gift touched me deeply. I placed the maple tree near the front window, where sunlight would reach it, a symbol of growth and renewal, visible to everyone who entered. Opening day dawned clear and cold, a perfect November morning. Charlotte and I arrived at 5 a.m. to prepare. Fresh pastries in the display case, coffee beans ground, books arranged on shelves, the maple tree by the window adjusting the position of its leaves in the early light. At exactly 7 a.m., we unlocked the doors. For a moment, we stood in the empty cafe, taking in the culmination of our hard work. "No matter what happens next," Charlotte said softly, "we did this. We created something beautiful." I squeezed her hand in silent agreement. Then the bell above the door chimed, and our first customer entered. The morning rush exceeded our most optimistic projections. Neighborhood residents, students from the nearby university, office workers grabbing coffee on their way to work. Even a few familiar faces from my entrepreneurship class at the community center. By noon, we had served over 100 customers. By closing time at 8 p.m., we had nearly sold out of everything. Charlotte and I collapsed into chairs at the last vacant table, exhausted but exhilarated. "Is it always like this?" she asked, rubbing her feet. "Opening day?" "No." I laughed. This was exceptional. "But don't worry, it will slow down." "I'm not sure I want it to," she grinned, "except maybe my feet do." As we were cleaning up, preparing to close, the bell above the door chimed one last time. I looked up, ready to apologize and explain we were closing, when the words died in my throat. My mother stood in the doorway, uncertain and frail-looking, in a way I had never associated with her. Her hair had more gray than I remembered. Her face, more lines. She clutched her purse with both hands, a gesture of nervousness I recognized from childhood. "Alexandra," she said softly. "I hope I'm not intruding." I froze, a cleaning cloth suspended in my hand. 1,000 emotions collided within me. Anger, hurt, longing, fear. All the carefully constructed boundaries I had built seemed suddenly fragile in the face of this unexpected confrontation. Charlotte glanced between us, immediately understanding. "I'll finish up in the back," she said tactfully, disappearing into the kitchen. My mother remained by the door, not presuming to enter further without invitation. "Your cafe is beautiful," she said. "So warm and inviting, just like Maple and Page's was." "How did you find me?" My voice sounded distant to my own ears. "Jordan from the community center. I called every community center in Manhattan until I found someone who knew you." A small, sad smile. I was very persistent. Of course she was. My mother had always been tenacious when she wanted something. The question was, what did she want now? As if reading my thoughts, she continued. "I'm not here to ask for anything, Alexandra. I needed to see you, to tell you in person what I wrote in my letter, that I'm sorry, that I'm proud of you." I set down the cloth, slowly buying time to compose myself. "You came all this way just to say that," she nodded, "and to see your new cafe, to see that you're okay." The simple admission disarmed me somewhat. Not a demand, not a guilt trip, just concern. "I'm okay," I confirmed. "Better than okay, actually." "I can see that." Her eyes took in the cafe, then returned to me. "There's a light in you that was dimmed before. It's beautiful to see." We stood in awkward silence for a moment. There was so much to say, yet the words seemed inadequate for the weight they needed to carry. Finally, I gestured to a table. "Would you like to sit? I can make you some tea." Relief flooded her face. "I'd like that very much." As I prepared the tea, my hands moving through the familiar motions, I reminded myself of the boundaries I had established. This was not a return to the old pattern. This was a new interaction on new terms. I could engage without surrendering my autonomy. We sat across from each other, steam rising from our cups, the cafe quiet around us. "How long are you in New York?" I asked. "Just tonight. I took the bus this morning and have a return ticket for tomorrow." She hesitated. "I'm staying at a hotel near the bus station. Nothing fancy but clean." The fact that she wasn't assuming she could stay with me was not lost on me. A small respect for boundaries that would have been unthinkable in our previous dynamic. "How is everyone?" I found myself asking, despite my determination to remain emotionally distant. Managing. She took a sip of tea. Your father is working full-time again. The hours are long, but the stability is good for him. Natalie. She paused. Natalie is growing up finally. The supermarket job has been a wake-up call. She's applied to graduate school for next fall. Business administration. I raised an eyebrow. Really? My mother nodded. She says she wants to understand what you knew. About building something from nothing. A pause. She talks about you a lot. About the lessons she's learning from your absence. The conversation continued cautious, but increasingly fluid. My mother shared news of neighbors' family friends changes in the old neighborhood. I found myself genuinely interested, though still guarded. This was my history after all, even if I had chosen to walk away from it. As she finished her tea, my mother reached into her purse and removed a small velvet box. I brought you something, a housewarming gift for your new cafe. I accepted the box warily, half expecting some emotional manipulation to be hidden within. But when I opened it, I found a delicate silver pendant in the shape of a maple leaf. One of my mother's handcrafted jewelry pieces more intricate and beautiful than anything she had made before. It's not expensive, she said quickly. Just silver and my time. But I wanted you to have something that represented your new beginning and your strength. The gesture touched me unexpectedly. This was not the mother I remembered, the one who had sat silent as Natalie called me a burden. This was someone new, or perhaps someone who had always been there beneath the dysfunction now finally visible. Thank you, I said softly. It's beautiful. We walked together to the door. The night had grown colder, streetlights reflecting off puddles from an earlier rain. Your hotel is far from here, I said. Let me call you a taxi. That would be kind, thank you. As we waited for the taxi standing side by side in the doorway of Rebirth, my mother spoke again. I don't expect things to be fixed with one visit, Alexandra. I know the hurt runs too deep for that. But I hope this might be a beginning of something new between us. I looked at her, this woman, who had been both the source of so much pain and so much love in my life. I can't go back to how things were, I said firmly. I won't be the family bank anymore. I would never ask that of you again, she assured me. Never. What I'm asking for is the chance to know my daughter, the real Alexandra, not just the provider you were forced to become. The taxi arrived, its yellow glow illuminating the sidewalk. My mother hesitated, then reached out and gently touched my arm. Think about it. That's all I ask. As the taxi pulled away, carrying my mother back to her hotel, I stood in the doorway of my new cafe, emotions swirling like autumn leaves in a breeze. The visit had unsettled me, reopened wounds I thought had scarred over. But it had also offered something unexpected, the possibility of a relationship based on mutual respect rather than exploitation. Charlotte emerged from the back. Are you okay? I nodded slowly. I think I am. It wasn't what I expected. Do you want to talk about it? Not tonight. Tonight I just want to celebrate what we've built here. We finished closing together, turning off lights, counting the day's impressive earnings, setting up for tomorrow. As I locked the door behind us, I glanced back at our creation. Rebirth, with its warm lights and maple tree in the window, looked like a beacon in the November darkness. This was mine, ours, built with clear boundaries, mutual respect, and lessons learned from painful experience. Whatever happened with my family, whether reconciliation or continued distance, I had created something that couldn't be taken away. Not just a cafe, but a life on my own terms. The weeks following my mother's visit were a whirlwind of activity. Rebirth thrived beyond our projections, requiring us to hire additional staff sooner than planned. My entrepreneurship classes at the community center expanded to 2 sessions per week due to popular demand, and my friendship with Jordan deepened into a relationship characterized by mutual support and respect. Life was full in a way it hadn't been for years, full of challenges certainly, but also full of joy, connection, and purpose. I was no longer defined solely by what I could provide to others. Instead, I was building relationships based on reciprocity, on the healthy exchange of giving and receiving. 1 month after opening day, another letter arrived from Boston. This one from Natalie. Unlike her first letter, which had been full of apologies, but short on understanding, this one demonstrated real growth. I've been working night shifts for 3 months now, she wrote. It's exhausting and often thankless. Customers are rude, managers are demanding. Pay is minimal compared to the effort required. And I keep thinking this must be how Alexandra felt for 3 years, working jobs she didn't love, watching her money disappear into family expenses, never being acknowledged for the sacrifice. She continued, describing her application to business school, her determination to build her own career, her new understanding of financial responsibility. I don't expect you to respond to this letter, she concluded. I just wanted you to know that your absence has taught me more than your presence ever could. Not because you left, but because it forced me to see what had been there all along, my own entitlement and the true cost of your sacrifice. This letter, unlike the first, didn't trigger anxiety or resentment. Instead, it felt like closure. Natalie had finally seen the truth, and more importantly, was acting on that understanding by changing her behavior. I decided to send a brief response, not opening the door to the old dynamic, but acknowledging the growth I sensed in her words. Thank you for your letter, I wrote on a simple note card. I'm glad you're finding your path. Rebirth Cafe 142, Waverly Place if you're ever in New York. Alexandra. No invitation. No forgiveness. Just an acknowledgement and a piece of information. A small opening, but with clear boundaries still intact. 2 weeks later, on a busy Saturday afternoon, I was working the espresso machine when I looked up to see Natalie standing at the counter. Thinner than I remembered, with shadows under her eyes, speaking of her night shift work, but with a new maturity in her expression. Alexandra, she said simply, your cafe is beautiful. I felt Charlotte tense beside me, ready to intervene if needed. But there was no need. This wasn't the entitled sister who had called me a burden. This was someone new, or perhaps someone who had always been there beneath the immaturity now finally emerging. Thank you, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. What can I get for you? Just a regular coffee, please. I took the bus in this morning, only here for the day. I prepared her coffee while she waited awkwardly at the counter. When I handed her the cup, our fingers brushed briefly, the first physical contact since that night in Boston. Would you like to sit? I asked, gesturing to a small table in the corner. I have a break in 10 minutes. Relief flooded her face. I'd like that very much. That conversation, held in the corner of Rebirth while customers came and went around us, wasn't easy. We didn't fall into sisterly camaraderie or pretend the hurt hadn't happened. Instead, we spoke honestly about the past, about the patterns that had developed in our family, about the changes we were both experiencing. I don't expect things to be fixed with one visit, Natalie echoed our mother's words from weeks earlier. I just wanted to see you, to see that you're okay. I'm more than okay, I told her truthfully. For the first time in years, I'm building a life that's truly mine. As she prepared to leave, catching the afternoon bus back to Boston, Natalie hesitated. Would it be all right if I visited again sometime? Maybe during spring break I could help out in the cafe, learn a bit about the business. The request surprised me. Not asking for money or emotional support, but for knowledge, for the chance to learn. It represented a fundamental shift in our dynamic. I'd be open to that, I said carefully, as long as expectations are clear. Absolutely. I'll pay for my own bus ticket, find my own accommodation. No assumptions. As I watched her walk away toward the bus station, I felt a curious lightness. Not the total healing of old wounds, but perhaps the beginning of a new kind of relationship, one built on respect rather than obligation. Over the following months, more changes unfolded. My father sent a letter briefer than my mother's or Natalie's, but no less significant. I was wrong, he wrote simply, about everything, the way we treated you, the expectations we placed on you. I am sorry, Alexandra, truly sorry. He enclosed a check, a repayment for some of what I had contributed over the years. Not the full amount, which would have been impossible for him, but a substantial sum representing genuine sacrifice on his part. I didn't cash it immediately. Instead, I held on to it, recognizing it for what it was, not just money, but a symbolic acknowledgement of debt, both financial and emotional. Spring arrived, bringing with it Natalie's visit as promised. True to her word, she arranged her own accommodation and offered to work in the cafe to learn the business. Charlotte was initially wary, but soon warmed to this new version of my sister, who worked hard, asked thoughtful questions, and never once slipped into the entitled behavior of the past. On her last evening in New York, as we closed up the cafe together, Natalie shared her plans. After I finish my MBA, I'm thinking of opening a small business in Boston, something that combines my marketing background with what I'm learning about business operations. What kind of business? I asked, genuinely curious. I'm not entirely sure yet. Not a cafe, she added quickly with a small smile. That's your domain. But something that serves the community, creates value. She hesitated. I'd like your advice as I develop the concept. Not your money, she clarified. Just your expertise, if you're willing to share it. The request touched me deeply. This was the sister I had always wanted. Someone who saw me for my knowledge and experience, not just what I could provide financially. I'd be happy to advise you, I agreed. And Charlotte would too, I'm sure. Between the three of us, we could develop something solid. As summer approached, bringing with it the 1-year anniversary of my departure from Boston, I received an invitation. My parents were renewing their wedding vows, a simple ceremony at home with just family and close friends. They would understand, the note said, if I chose not to attend. No pressure, no guilt. Just an open door if I wanted to walk through it. I considered the invitation for several days, discussing it with Charlotte, with Jordan, even with my entrepreneurship students in a general way. How do you know when it's safe to re-engage with people who have hurt you? I asked them one evening. What boundaries are necessary to protect yourself while still allowing for growth and connection? Their answers, drawn from their own diverse experiences, were thoughtful and nuanced. They spoke of clear communication, of watching actions, rather than just listening to words, of starting with small, low-risk interactions before moving to larger commitments. In the end, I decided to attend, but with careful preparation. I booked my own hotel room in Boston rather than staying at the family home. I arranged for Jordan to accompany me as emotional support, and I set clear internal boundaries about what I would and would not discuss, what I would and would not offer. The ceremony itself was simple and moving. My parents, older and humbler than I remembered, exchanging vows that spoke of new beginnings and lessons learned. Natalie standing beside them, her pride evident in every glance. A small gathering of family friends, many of whom had been present at that fateful graduation dinner, now witnessing a different kind of milestone. I remained somewhat apart, observing more than participating, Jordan's steady presence beside me, a reminder that I had built a life beyond this family circle. Not cutting myself off entirely, but maintaining the necessary distance for health and safety. At the small reception afterward, my father approached me, his movements hesitant, his expression uncertain. Alexandra, he began, your mother and I have been discussing the house. We've decided to sell it. The announcement surprised me. The house had been in our family for generations. It's too large for us now, he continued, and too full of complicated memories. We're looking at smaller places, something more manageable on our income. He paused. The equity from the sale after paying off the remaining mortgage would be substantial. We'd like to divide it equally between you and Natalie. I started to protest, but he held up his hand. This isn't about guilt or obligation. It's about fairness. You invested thousands in that house over the years. This is simply returning what was already yours. The conversation continued, moving into territory I had thought would be too painful to revisit. Financial decisions, family dynamics, the patterns that had led to my exploitation and eventual departure. But instead of deflection or denial, I found acknowledgement, understanding, genuine remorse. Not everything was resolved in that single conversation, nor in the brief visit to Boston. Some wounds were too deep, some patterns too ingrained to be healed in days or weeks or even months. But something had shifted. A door had opened to a new kind of relationship with my family. Not the enmeshed, boundaryless dynamic of the past, but something healthier. Something based on mutual respect and clear expectations. As Jordan and I drove back to New York after the weekend, I felt a sense of completion that had eluded me for years. Not because everything was perfect, far from it, but because I had finally learned the most valuable lesson of all, that love without boundaries isn't love at all. It's exploitation. And that true connection can only exist between people who see each other clearly, who respect each other's separateness, even as they choose to come together. Back at Rebirth, sharing the experience with Charlotte over closing time tea, I found myself smiling at the symmetry of it all. A year ago, I was the invisible wallet, the safety net everyone took for granted. Now I'm just Alexandra, still generous when I choose to be, still caring, but no longer defined by what I give. Charlotte raised her cup in a small toast. To visible wallets and healthy boundaries. And to second chances, I added, glancing at the maple tree by the window, now flourishing with new growth. The kind we give to others, but most importantly, the kind we give ourselves. The evening light filtered through the leaves, casting dappled shadows across the cafe floor. Outside, Manhattan continued its ceaseless rhythm. Inside, in this space we had created together, I was finally completely at home in my own life. Not because I had cut off all connections to my past, but because I had learned to engage with both past and present on my own terms. The invisible wallet had become visible, and in that visibility had found its true value at last.